So, today I wanted to talk just a little bit about the concept of radical acceptance and why it is so important. So, radical acceptance is one of the primary teachings on the Buddhist path. It is also a wonderful book by Tara Brach that I definitely suggest. And it is also one of the DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy practices and skills. So, DBT is really, really good for folks who have high emotional sensitivity and have experienced trauma and or been in situations where they feel like they are being rejected or not accepted for who they are. When we are highly sensitive, when we are in a traumatic situation that does not feel supportive to our systems, we will have high emotional reactivity and sort of chronic and pervasive emotional dysregulation. So, this can really be a challenge for those of us who are survivors of childhood trauma, who again were just born with this innate high sensitivity. So, this can be helpful, a helpful skill for everyone. So, again, radical acceptance says, even though I don't like what's happening here, even though what's happening is really horrible, and this could be something that's happening now or that happened in the past, I am going to accept it. So I want to clarify that acceptance is not the same as approval. It's not the same as saying, I like it or I approve of it. I think it's okay. It's not the same thing. Acceptance just says that I actually don't really like it. I actually don't approve of it, but I want to be at peace in my life as much as possible. So I'm willing to accept it, right? So it doesn't require our approval at all. Now, why this is so important is that when we push back on something, when we resist what is or what has happened in the past, we generate immense suffering for ourselves. Now, we know, again, this is one of the main tenets of the Buddhist path, that pain is a part of life. Absolutely. We can look back at our own lives, at the history of the planet, even, and say, yeah, pain is a part of the human experience. It's not going to go anywhere, right? But suffering is optional. So pain is just what's there. Suffering is what happens when we fight what's there, right? When we're like, no, I don't want it to be this way. It's not fair. It wasn't fair. It should be some other way. I'm going to try to change it, even though it's something I can't change. So, just side note, if it's something that you can change, by all means, try to change it. But I'm really talking about things that are out of our control, which is a lot of things, right? Somebody you know gets really sick and dies prematurely. You get sick and it's something that's incurable. Um, War and different things that happen, right? But just things that are out of our control, that if we rail against them, they're not going to change. All we're going to do is generate more suffering for ourselves in the process and keep ourselves stuck. So you could even say, even though I don't like this situation and I wish it were different, I'm willing to accept the way it is, right? So we're still holding the truth. We're still holding space for your feelings about the situation. So you can still have that. We're not pushing that away. It's like, I don't like it. It's not fair. That's absolutely true, right? And we know life's not fair and we're not in charge of that, right? So it's like, and I have no control over this situation. So, in order to feel okay, in order to regain or maintain my sense of peace, I am willing to accept that this is the way things are. And so that liberates us from this internal resistance and this fight that again leads to our own suffering. And I think we all have had situations in our lives where something unfair or painful happened, and we just held on and mentally, ruminated or tried to fight it or went on and on about the unfairness of it, either just in ourselves or, complaining to other people about the unfairness or injustice of whatever happened, right? And then we just continue to perpetuate and sort of drag along behind us the pain of what happened, right? So I feel that one of the things is that when we start to accept the unacceptable, right? Let's say, as I'm working with survivors, that you had suffered really horrible abuse as a child, right? Completely and totally unfair, should not have been that way, right? It absolutely should not have happened. And that is really true. And yet, as long as you are continuing to internally rail against the unfairness of that, right? It wasn't fair. It should have been this way. Why didn't that happen? Or why didn't I do X, Y, or Z? And you continue with that internal resistance, you're going to be stuck in that cycle of suffering and tied to that past pain. So it's sort of like you're dragging a bag of old energy, old painful energy behind you into your life, continuing to perpetuate that pain in your current life, right? Because we're dragging it around. As long as we don't accept the circumstances of our lives, what happened in the past and what's happening now, we will continue to perpetuate that in our lives, right? And I know a lot of people feel like, oh, if I accept this, it means that I'm saying that it's okay, that I'm approving of it. And so I want to clarify that is not, again, that is not the same thing. No, you can have your no, it was not fair, it was not okay, and say, and I want to be free. So because I want to be free, I'm willing to accept that this is what it is. Now, I'm going to use myself as an example and say, this is definitely something that as a survivor of childhood trauma and adult narcissistic abuse that I was perpetuating inside of myself, right? I had this way that I could not get past what happened to me and the fact that what happened to me as a child had permanently altered my brain, and my physiology. It had really molded me as a human being, obviously. And I felt that it had changed me in ways that weren't all good. And that is true, right? Trauma alters us in ways. However, until I was able to accept that, okay, these things happened and they have changed who I am sort of permanently in some ways, I was not able to reap the benefits of that. Now, you might say, what are the benefits of having trauma and having abuse? Well, there are some. And for me, some of that has been this level of resilience, of strength, of determination, of compassion that is born directly out of suffering, right? And had I not had those situations, I may not have access to that kind of resilience and inner strength, courage, and compassion that I do, right? So there are gifts that are born out of any challenging situation. However, as long as we are resisting said situation, we cannot reap the benefits. And again, remain stuck and in this cycle of suffering. So, one more note on that with radical acceptance is one of authenticity. I did do a video yesterday just briefly talking about menopause as an invitation to authenticity. And I feel that this is a huge component is that I can only be as authentic as I am willing to accept who I am on every level. And part of that is the acceptance of what happened to me that was against my will or without my say, right? Like the abuse and the neglect and things like that. Or even the choices I've made and the choices I haven't made. Until I decide that I really accept all the choices I've made, good, bad, and ugly, and in between, and everything that happened to me, I cannot fully be who I am, right? Because I'm saying to parts of myself, no, you're not okay. I don't want that part. I don't want this part, right? I only want the pretty shiny parts. And I am denying parts of myself, which is, of course, part of the shadow, which I've talked about before, Carl Jung's work around the shadow, pushing away parts of myself and refusing to accept and love parts of myself. But in order to be authentic, in order to be all of who I am, in order to relieve myself from suffering, I have to be willing to accept all of it. All of the choices I've made, not made, all of what was done to me without my permission, everything that I have done that I regret, all of it has to be accepted so that I can be liberated from suffering and so that I can be 100% my authentic self. That's the bottom line, right? So radical acceptance has these far reaching repercussions. It is a crucial element to coming to peace in our lives, coming to peace with life in general, with ourselves, with what happened, and with the way of things, right? With what it means to be human on planet Earth. So I hope this has been helpful. And if you have any questions or comments, please do put them below. I would love to hear from you. And if you like this video and found it useful, please do hit the like button. And please do subscribe if you enjoy our content. We release new videos every week. And I do work with trauma survivors. I am offering somatic experiencing work, among other things. And I would be more than happy to support you in your healing journey. And I will look forward to seeing you again very soon. Be well.